what's the challenge when someone's lost their belief because they've had a heartbreak? Let's say, what happens when someone's been catfished, when they've been betrayed, when they've been heartbroken, when they've been cheated on, when they've been lied to, manipulated, gaslit? Like, they've had a moment that has made them lose belief because they've been hurt and broken so many times in love.
Yeah.
And now you're right, on a belief level, they don't believe they're lovable. They don't believe love exists for them. They don't believe good people exist, right? These are all beliefs. And so what do you do when you've actually gone through quite a, you could call it a traumatic, a toxic event or experience that someone's been through?
Yeah, I think everybody's had those. I think, once again, the stronger the emotion you feel from some event in your life, the more altered you are inside of you, the more you remember the event. The brain actually freezes that frame, right? So the person thinks neurologically within the circuitry of that experience, and they feel chemically within the boundaries of that emotion. And how we think and how we feel becomes our state of being. So every time they remember the event, they're producing that same chemistry, as I said, over and over again, and you're conditioning the body into a belief, right? And the moment we draw a conclusion about that experience, that's the belief, right? That becomes the belief that we accept to, believe, and surrender to. So then beliefs are subconscious states of being, right? So, and it tends to be 95% of who we are by the time we get to the middle of our life. So it's those subconscious beliefs that really run our life and run our reality. So it would make sense then to the person, unless I can heal from the experience and overcome the emotion, because the memory without the emotional charge is called wisdom, and you never have to do it again because you know now that you know. If that's the truth, then okay, I'll do this for a period of time, but this state is not loving to me. Living in this state is not loving to me. What's loving to me is that I actually overcome the emotion of the past. And when I overcome the emotion of the past, now the body's no longer believing in that any longer, right? So that theoretically is easier said than done. So the survival emotions tend to become very addictive. So the rush of just remembering the event is an arousal for the body, and people become very addicted to their beliefs, right? And so, but if you tell a person like, okay, your subconscious mind is going to keep replaying the same experience in your life unless you heal, okay, that could make sense to certain people. If you can't overcome that emotion, then you'll never be able to open your heart. So do you want love in your life or not? Okay, forgiveness then, and we've discovered this. Forgiveness is when you overcome the emotion of your past and you no longer have your attention on that person or that experience any longer, right? And so you feel so good that you no longer want to feel bad, right? And so you free yourself from that belief, and you free that person as well, or the experience. And literally that's energy that's liberated as information that the body can actually use to create with, right? So I think there's information and knowledge that just has to be given to people for them to understand, okay, justified or not, valid or not, the only person that this really is affecting is me. They went on with their life.
Yeah.
They started a new career. They're living in a new place. They're writing a book. They're on their way, and you're holding yourself hostage to the past, right? So then you got to trust that love is available, or love is real. In order for you to create someone in your life that is loving, you would have to be worthy of love, and that means you would have to feel love too. So I think people make their way out of this all the time, and we deal with severe PTSD, with veterans. And there's some pretty brutal memories there, and there's a lot of trauma that's stored in the body as well, and they deal with a lot of difficulties. And when you tell them, It's the heart that resets the baseline for the trauma in the brain. All you have to do is have the courage to open that thing again. And they may come up against themselves for a few days, but once it happens, and they understand the process, their past is wisdom. They don't have to ever go back there again, right? They understand it all, but there's no charge associated with it any longer. And that's when we belong to the future, right? That's when the synchronicities and the coincidences and the miracles and the opportunities begin to show up in our life that prove to us that we are the creators of our life.
What's the anatomy of belief? Because I feel like we know that beliefs are repeated patterns, they're repeated conditioned ideas, they're so hardwired. And if we were to start picking up, is it that we're picking apart our beliefs, or we're purifying them, or we're renewing them? Like what's the process?
So I believe that all beliefs are created from past experiences. And a belief is just a thought you keep thinking over and over again until you hardwired in your brain. And a hardwired set of circuits is an automatic unconscious program. So we have a lot of beliefs about things that we're not even conscious of.
And they're not been tested. We don't know if they're true.
We don't know if they're true. We've actually, in fact, made them up. And this happens quite a bit in the work that we do. People see the testimonials, they see the science, they see the data, and they say, oh my God, I actually believe that this stuff works. And they're facing a chronic health condition or a serious health condition, and they come to the realization that they just became conscious that they didn't believe it would work for them. It would work. It looks like it works, but I never thought it could work for me. Now, this is a big moment, because this is the moment where you're stepping out of the bleachers onto the playing field, right? This is now where you got to show up for yourself, right? The person, when they sit down and they decide to make a different choice, and this is the hardest part about change, the moment you decide to make a different choice, you're going to feel uncomfortable. You're going to leave the familiar known, right? And the body, which has been conditioned into the past, into the known, which has been conditioned to be the mind. The servant's the master, and it's going to try to talk you out of that future that is unfamiliar, or unknown, or unpredictable. And so that's the moment where the beliefs start coming up. You know, you're not good enough. This is too hard. You'll never change. You can't create anything. It's this person's fault. There's something wrong with me. I want to quit. And then people say, like, oh, well, I have ADD, you know, I can't focus my mind. And it turns out they say, I'm not a good meditator, or I can't control my mind, and meditation's not for me. But really, I'm doing it wrong, they'll say. But in fact, they're actually doing it right. Because sitting with yourself and becoming conscious of all of those unconscious thoughts means now you're no longer the program. You're only the program when you're unconscious to that belief. The moment you become conscious of that unconscious belief, the greater the probability that you won't go unconscious to it again. And that's how you become more conscious, is catching yourself going unconscious, and it becomes a skill. The more you practice it, the better you get at going like, I'm just not going to believe that any longer. And nerve cells that no longer fire together no longer wire together. So as you attend to that thought and notice it and observe it without actually believing it, it weakens the connections neurologically in the brain. And there's a neurological death or a separation that's taking place. Okay, so the person then who blames and complains and makes excuses and feels sorry for themselves and behaves a certain way, well, those are habits, right? And those are unconscious programmed behaviors. The only way you're going to change is to become conscious that you complain all day long, or you blame somebody for your life. A happy person would never want to be that, want to behave that way, and would never want to be in a relationship with a person who complains all the time. Why would you, right? So then that person says, okay, how many times do I have to forget until I stop forgetting and start remembering? That is my moment of change. So today, I'm going to behave in a different way and make a different choice. I'm going to just stay conscious to not do these things. Okay, and then the person says, well, I feel unworthy, I feel stressed, I feel unhappy, I feel sad, I feel victimized, I feel grief, whatever. Is this the emotion that I want to have in my future? Well, no, these are emotions that are connected to experiences of the past. If I truly want love in my life, I can't feel resentment. Okay, am I willing to trade resentment for this elevated emotion? Okay, let me just remember all the times in my day, if I start noticing I feeling this emotion, I'm just going to become conscious and not go unconscious to it and just temper it and work with it. Okay, so that is that overcoming process. That is the becoming process. Now, it would make sense then, you would have to ask yourself, what do I want to believe? What is a thought that I do want to fire and wire in my brain? So with intention and with attention, if you had the person remember what they wanted to believe and keep remembering what they want to believe and keep remembering what they want to believe, they begin to install the hardware. If you keep attending to it, the hardware becomes like a software program, and now that's the new belief.
Yeah.
I can heal. I can find the relationship. And belief is like pregnancy. Either you are or you're not. I mean, there's no in between. So you want to install the circuitry to such a degree that that's the new voice in your head.
Yeah.
That's saying, come on, Jay, get up. Come on, Jay, let's go. Come on, you can do this. Come on, make the time for it. Come on, this is your vision. Come on.
It's a coach in your own head.
It's a voice.
Yeah, a voice.
The voice is no longer the disbelief. The voice is basically your future self talking to you is what it is. It's your future. All right, so if I start behaving in the old way, I know I'm gonna disbelieve. So how do I want to behave? How am I going to behave on my next date? How am I going to behave on my next Zoom meeting with my team? How am I going to behave with my children or in my family, or with my partner, with my ex? How do I want to be? And the act of rehearsing mentally in your mind who you want to be, the act of just closing your eyes and mentally rehearsing that scene literally causes the brain to look like you already did it. It looks like it's already happened, right? So now you're priming the brain neurologically. Keep doing it over and over again. The hardware becomes more automatic, like a software program. You naturally get your behaviors to match your intentions, and because you installed the circuitry. Practice feeling the elevated emotion. If you feel that emotion and you say, when I feel this emotion, I can believe in that future, then let me just keep remembering to feel this way in every part of my day. And this is not about positive thinking. This is about conditioning my body emotionally into the future. So I got to keep my energy up the entire day, and I can't default back to the old person. As long as I'm feeling this emotion, I'm going to behave that way. As long as I'm feeling this emotion, I'm going to believe in that future. If I maintain this modified state of mind and body my entire day as an experiment, should there be some evidence in my life as a result of my change in state of being, a synchronicity, a coincidence? And if there is, then I'm going to do it again. I'm going to actually do it again. And I think that's how we start stepping into that future. What
are some of the changes that you've seen people make in their life that have had the biggest changes in their life?
Oh my God, I've seen the most amazing things in the last, in the last few years. I mean, the Joe Dispenza that's sitting here today has had a dramatic change in his belief system. In witnessing human transformation to the scale that I've witnessed it, that's literally changed my belief in what's possible, right? I mean, it's coming from the data that we're gathering, but it's also coming from the stories of transformation, testimonials. And this, I have to be careful about this because this is a stretch for a lot of people. I'm not talking about, just 50 people. I'm talking about hundreds, if not thousands of people who've broken the 4-minute mile, that they went from absolute bankruptcy in severe debt to, superabundance, whole new life by changing. I've seen people with all kinds of health conditions, from muscular dystrophy to spinal cord injuries, to Parkinson's disease, to stage 4 cancers, through all kinds of crazy, serious health conditions to go into complete remission. The person changed, and when they changed, their health changed. I've seen people's brain scans when they're in that place of a transcendental experience. I've seen what the brain looks like. That arousal that's taking place in that moment where they're connecting is not fear. It's not anger. It's not pain. That's what typically creates arousal of survival. This arousal is ecstasy. This arousal is bliss. They're having a transcendental moment where they're interacting with something that's beyond their senses, that's causing their body to be lifted and aroused.
How much work does it take?
That's the crazy thing about what we're discovering. Get a group of people together. Give them information that's based on science. Have them understand the information. Have it teach it back to somebody. Have them understand what they're doing and why they're doing it. Combine quantum physics with neuroscience and neuroendocrinology and psychoneuroimmunology and epigenetics and electromagnetism and Newtonian physics and all that stuff. But make it really simple that it makes sense to them so they can understand it. Leave nothing to conjecture, nothing to superstition, nothing to dogma. Have it wired in their brains so they can teach it back to somebody, they understand it. Set up the conditions in the environment to apply that information, that philosophy, that theory, personalize it, demonstrate it, do something with it. Get your behaviors to match your intentions, get your actions equal to your thoughts, get your mind and body working together, you're gonna have a new experience. Experience enriches circuitry in the brain and it makes a chemical, and that chemical is called a feeling or an emotion. And now you're teaching your body chemically to understand what your mind is intellectually understood. Now the knowledge isn't just in the mind, the knowledge is in the information and the experience is now in the body. That's what emotion does. So we're chemically instructing our body to understand what our mind is intellectually understood. So get a group of people together and have them understand information and then go to the application. You can see that in 7 days, people have these very profound transcendental experiences.
At your progress workshops?
Yeah, and the week-long retreats. And so when we look at the data and people who hit these aroused states, sometimes it's more than 50% of the subjects that we're measuring in terms of their brain scans. So it's not like one person or two people. It happens more and more as people get better at doing it. Yeah.
I saw in Source, you talked about how protein in meditation that creates immunity. I wanted you to talk about that. That just sounds mind-blowing.
As I said, genes make proteins, and proteins are responsible for the structure and function of your body. The expression of proteins is the expression of life. So react and respond to conditions that cause you to feel the emotions of survival. Your reaction or your response to that condition, to that challenge, will actually weaken your body if you keep doing it over and over again. Stress consumes enormous amounts of energy for the body. So the repetition of that begins to downregulate genes and create disease. And so if you can turn on the stress response just by thinking about that problem, your thoughts could make you sick. So the question is, can your thoughts make you well? And so we said to people, okay, trade resentment and impatience and frustration for an elevated emotion like gratitude or appreciation, kindness and care. We'll hook you up to a heart rate monitor. We want to make sure that your heart is coherent so we know that you're actually feeling these emotions. And we're gonna measure an immunoglobulin called immunoglobulin A, which is really the primary defense against bacteria and virus in your body. It's the body's natural flu shot. And it's suppressed when cortisol levels go up because stress hormones shut down the immune system. So could a person then create an elevated emotion, and the body is so objective that it does not know the difference between a real-life experience that's creating that emotion and the emotion that that person is fabricating by thought alone. To the body, it's the unconscious mind, it's the same. So if the person feels the elevated emotion, will they begin to signal new genes that will make new proteins. And we discovered that that particular immunoglobulin A went up by 50% in the subjects that we measured. So feeling elevated emotions causes the body to upregulate genes and allow the immune system to repair and regenerate. Now, that study was our first study, but when we started looking at the plasma of advanced meditators, right around the time COVID happened, in some of our first experiments that we did with the University of California, San Diego, we had all this plasma, and they closed the lab down and closed the university down, and the lab was minimized. But we had all this great plasma from advanced meditators, so there was a little bit of time, so we just started messing around with creating a pseudovirus like a SARS-CoV-2 virus. And we picked the first subject, and we did what's called an adoptive transfer. We used his plasma and put the pseudovirus near an ACE2 receptor, which would, what the spike virus attaches to. And we discovered that there was an immunity in the plasma of the advanced meditator where the virus could not enter the cell, like it was like stuck on the outside of the cell. We saw that in novice meditators, there were some that were stuck to the outside of the cell and others that made it into the cell. And then we saw with the controls that they all were in the cell. And so we went through a series of scientific experiments, and we isolated that it was a protein. And then we isolated the exact protein that the body and advanced meditators make, and it's called SERPINA5. And if you look online for SERPINA5, it'll tell you that it has a profound effect against the SARS-CoV-2 virus. And so the plasma of advanced meditators were naturally creating an elevated level of SERPINA5 that inhibited the virus from entering the cells. In other words, the body is greater than the environment. And so we've replicated the study a few times, and we see the same outcomes. We published a paper on it, and it's out there.
Wow, that's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, we were super surprised. Yeah. We were really surprised when we saw it.
That is very surprising. Yeah. It's mind-blowing to think about that being possible, but I guess it shouldn't be. It's just that we haven't really accessed the true powers of the body and the mind, and we're almost unaware. We always hear that quote of like, you only use 10% of your brain or whatever it is. Yeah, and the thing that's really going to stay with me today is that I used to believe that the opposite of love was hate, but actually it's stress.
Yeah.
And because a lot of people will say I'm not a hateful person, but I think everyone will agree that they're a stressed out person.
Yeah. Well, fear is not the opposite of love. It's the separation from it.
Yeah.
And, pain and suffering is not the opposite of love. It's the separation from it. Anger, hatred, hostility, violence, it's not the opposite of love. It's the separation from it. Mm-hmm. So then a person who begins to transform themselves, and we work with prisons, thousands and thousands of prisoners. And these are people that can't even close their eyes and meditate because their instinct tells them that something really horrible will happen to them because they've had a turbulent past. You see, prisoners come together, right, and move out of stress. The absence of the addiction to the stress hormones is called joy. The body is free. It's no longer out of balance. And people come back into the balance of their true self. They feel like themselves again. Like, God, I feel like myself again. I got my life back. And I just read a testimonial from one of the veterans that we did a study on PTSD just last week in a retreat that we did. These are people that had some pretty turbulent pasts, and that were suicidal. And this guy said, I was ready to take my life. I was ready. I had the pills to end my own misery. And I feel completely different now. I've got my life back. I got my family back. I got everything's different, right? And I'm different. I feel it. I can't stop crying. So the war ended. The war ended for him. It ended. He's not an old soldier now. He's a new soldier, right? It ended. So that person who tells the story of their mental health change, the person who tells the story of their change from their physical health condition, the person who tells the story that's gone from bankruptcy to abundance, the person who tells the story of how the synchronicity of them running into the person that would become the love of their life happened. When they stand on the stage and they tell the story to the collective, there's a change in consciousness because the person's becoming aware. There's truth standing right on the stage. There's an example of truth that's telling them that somehow this person has changed and their life and their health has changed, or their future changed in some way. And that 4-minute mile, then, the person that's speaking it is breaking through a certain level of consciousness or unconsciousness, and surely someone in the audience is going to relate with them. They're going to see, my goodness, if that person can do it, I can do it as well, right? And that's when it gets really fun, because that's when the person believes in themselves a little bit more, right? And their belief in possibility is enhanced. And they're able to make their change in a shorter amount of time. In other words, they're shortening the distance between the thought of what they want and the experience of having it when they do it properly, right? So get enough people together in an immersive experience, and someone has that change or that breakthrough. You start seeing like 5 people step out of a wheelchair in one event, 2 people blind, 2 people came to the event blind, seeing at the end of 7 days. It's unbelievable. So the evidence and testimony is that 4-minute mile, and people do the best with what they think is available. So if you don't know, or if you're not conscious of that possibility, you'll make the same choice.
Yes.
And so when people become conscious of it, now they can begin to make a different choice. And I think for as many crazy things that are going on in the world, and that's a whole nother conversation, there's a lot of amazing, great, unbelievable things happening as well, like really amazing things. And so, yeah, we just got to hold on.
Absolutely. Joe, thank you so much for coming back onto On Purpose, sharing your incredible research experiences. And this is going to be one of those ones that I'm going to probably listen to again with my eyes closed, because I think there were so many powerful parts that, especially around when we're trying to rewire our thoughts, when we're trying to, as you were saying, to feel and experience something before it happens. I think if we can really just take all of that in, and if we can start to construct our community around us to build a collective consciousness that pushes us all forward, helps us change, I think we'll be onto something. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Your time, your energy, your presence.
And make it an experiment.
Yes.
Make it an experiment. Don't make it a have to.
Yeah.
Make it a want to. Like, okay, let me just see. If I change my energy, will my life change?
Absolutely.
If I change something about me, a belief, a behavior, an emotion, should something in my life, some event begin to change? That's when it becomes exciting, right? And now it's an experiment.
Well said. The Source is out right now. You can go watch as well the new documentary with Dr. Joe Dispenza. And Joe, excited for so much more. Congratulations on all the retreats and workshops. And again, thank you so much for joining me on Purpose.
Thank you, Jay. I always appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.